Welcome to Starbound. My name is I Am Duck, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspy Academy and Freyrin and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's get into today's story. The composite door to the warehouse splintered under Master Chief Petty Officer Rick Donovan's boot. He'd been practicing that particular kick for 20 years, and the result was a familiar, satisfying crack of wood and metal. His JSOC team flowed through the breach, a tide of black armor and aimed rifles. The targets inside made him question whether this was a matter of national security or a casting call for a very strange comedy. "Freeze!" Rick's voice was a bark of pure command. The figures in lab coats, frantically trying to destroy evidence, froze. They wore what appeared to be human faces, but faces made of cheap latex, misplaced optimism, and a fundamental misunderstanding of anatomy. One of them turned, its disguise looking like a child's drawing of a person. The eyes were too far apart, the nose was slightly off-center, and it kept blinking horizontally. "Greetings, fellow human," the alien said. Its English was perfectly grammatical, but the delivery had the flat, sterile tone of a legal disclaimer. "I am also a human person. I am conducting normal human activities in this normal human building." Sergeant Alves, Rick's second, muttered into his comm, his voice tight with suppressed laughter. "Chief, are we sure these are bioterrorists? This feels like we're arresting the high school drama club." The aliens, and there was no doubt now, resumed their clumsy destruction. One tipped over a centrifuge with a clatter, then announced to the room, "Oops, I have made a typical human mistake with my normal human clumsiness." "Sir," called Corporal Keene from deep in the lab, "you need to see this." Rick moved through the facility, his rifle sweeping over suspects who seemed more bewildered than dangerous. Keene stood beside a gleaming bioreactor that belonged in a top-tier CDC lab, not a derelict warehouse in Detroit. Alien script scrolled across monitors, and the equipment pulsed with a low thrum that made Rick's radiator detector tick with a nervous, intermittent rhythm. "What the hell are we looking at, Keene?" "Near as I can figure, Chief, it's a biological weapons laboratory. Except..." Keene gestured at the aliens who were now arguing in a series of clicks and whistles that sounded vaguely like a modem trying to connect. "I don't think they have a clue what they're doing." An alien approached Rick, its hands raised in what it must have believed was a universal gesture of surrender. It looked more like it was trying to signal a landing aircraft. "Please do not be alarmed, fellow human. We are merely conducting research into seasonal allergies for the betterment of all humanity." Rick's gaze fell on the creature's baseball cap. It was on backwards, but it was also inside out. He keyed his comm, the decision made. "Alves, get the CDC on the line. We're going to need a specialist to figure out what brand of stupid these guys were cooking up." Dr. Nathan Cross received the samples from Detroit with the ingrained wariness of a man who had spent 15 years analyzing everything from weaponized anthrax to suspicious potato salad. The containers, flagged by the FBI's biological warfare team, carried warnings that suggested either the dawn of a new plague or another embarrassing false alarm. His laboratory at the CDC was the bleeding edge of pathogen analysis, a sterile sanctuary staffed by scientists who could parse a genome with the focus of a bomb disposal technician. What they found in the Detroit samples, however, defied every known principle of bioweapons design. The pathogens are, for lack of a better word, remarkable, Nathan announced to his research team, his voice echoing slightly in the briefing room. He gestured to the main display. Genetically engineered with a sophistication that rivals anything we can do. Clearly designed to target human immune responses. He paused, tapping the screen where a string of baffling data glowed. And they are completely, utterly harmless. Dr. Rebecca Walsh, his sharp-witted deputy, looked up from a tablet. Harmless in what way, Nathan? Dormant? Worse. They're fully active. Nathan pointed to a molecular model on the screen. The genetic payload is designed to induce a cytokine storm, to tear through cellular membranes. Instead, it triggers a mild histamine response. It's as if someone engineered the perfect bioweapon using a textbook on human biology that was translated into their language and then back into English by a broken computer. He swiped to a new screen, showing a different genetic sequence. Look here. This one has a sophisticated protein designed to disrupt neural function. In practice, it causes minor fatigue and congestion. And this one, this elegant cellular infiltration mechanism, should trigger catastrophic organ failure. The actual result, watery eyes and the occasional sneeze. Could this be a proof of concept? Asked a virologist from the back. A test run with an attenuated version. Nathan shook his head, a knot of genuine concern tightening in his gut. The samples show at least 3 distinct design methodologies, different genetic editors, different protein structures, different delivery vectors. It's as if 3 separate teams working in total isolation were all given the same assignment. Create a weapon to kill humans, and all 3 of them fundamentally misunderstood our physiology in a unique and spectacular way. He brought up a comparative chart. The theoretical impact column was a sea of red, predicting immune system collapse in 72 hours. The observed results column, based on their tests with mice, bioengineered with human immune markers, showed a temporary rise in allergy symptoms and increased mucus production. The failure was more disturbing than success would have been. Such advanced genetic engineering paired with such catastrophic ignorance was a paradox. Rebecca, I want a full genomic sequence on every sample. If these are different teams, I want to know who they are. See if the engineering signatures match anything on file. Nathan hesitated, the next words feeling absurd on his tongue. And run the protein structures through the xenobiology database. Colonel Frank Dermott walked into the Pentagon's Crisis Management Center with Nathan's preliminary analysis in his briefcase. He felt the familiar weight of a career teetering on the edge of becoming either very interesting or very short. The assembled officials, a constellation of stars and eagles from every branch of the military and intelligence communities, were responsible for protecting America from threats they understood. This was not one of them. Gentlemen, ma'am, Frank began, placing the classified folder on the polished mahogany table with a quiet thud. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention. General Patricia Hayes, his direct superior, and a woman whose stare could melt steel, gestured for him to continue. What kind of situation, Frank? Okay. Extraterrestrial operatives are conducting biological warfare on U.S. soil, using pathogens designed to exterminate the human population. Frank delivered the line with the same flat effect he used to report quarterly maintenance schedules. In this room, treating the absurd as routine was a survival skill. A heavy silence filled the room. It wasn't disbelief, but the sound of 24 powerful minds rebooting their fundamental assumptions about national defense. "Frank," said Deputy Director Collins of the CIA, his voice dangerously soft, "are you standing there under the seal of the Department of Defense and telling me we are under attack by aliens?" I am reporting the findings of a coordinated operation between JSOC and the CDC," Frank stated, opening the folder. He slid a photograph across the table. It showed one of the aliens from the Detroit lab, its latex mask askew, looking more confused than menacing. "These individuals were captured in a facility containing biotechnology far in advance of our own. They were attempting to deploy bioweapons engineered for human extinction." General Hayes picked up the photo. "This looks like a bad Halloween costume." "Yes, ma'am. But the technology was real, and the pathogens show genetic engineering that target our biology with frightening precision." Frank took a breath, preparing for the part that always strained credulity. "The problem isn't the science. It's the application. The weapons are designed to kill us. Instead, they give us hay fever." "So you're telling me," Collins said, leaning forward slowly, "that little green men are trying to murder us with pollen?" "I'm telling you," Frank countered, his voice like stone, "that at least 3 distinct extraterrestrial species appear to be engaged in a coordinated biological campaign against this planet, and that all of them are working from flawed intelligence. Dr. Cross at the CDC confirms it. Their genetic engineering is brilliant. Their understanding of our biology is non-existent." The room was quiet again. Frank could practically see the political calculus spinning in their heads. The career risk of taking him seriously versus the national risk of not. "Frank," General Hayes said finally, her voice cutting through the tension, "I'm going to need more than bad costumes and a failed alien flu season to justify the resources I suspect you're about to request." "Understood, General." Frank produced his final piece of evidence. "Ambassador Hutchinson at the Galactic Concordat reports a recent coordinated outpouring of condolences from multiple delegations regarding a devastating planetary health crisis on Earth. Meanwhile, our only major public health spike is in the sale of Kleenex." The full picture snapped into focus. The officials in the room exchanged looks, the absurdity giving way to a chilling realization. They were facing an enemy simultaneously more advanced and more incompetent than any threat assessment had ever conceived. The Zexhai Collective convened its primary analysis node, a silent consensus of minds linked across the cold vacuum of their orbital station. Data streams flooded their shared consciousness, every byte contradicting the established models of biological warfare that had won them 17 star systems. Their campaign against the humans was, by every metric, a catastrophic failure. Query: pathogen deployment executed with 99.8% precision across designated continental landmasses. Vector analysis confirms optimal population exposure. Query: human societal disruption metrics show no deviation from baseline. Economic and military activity remain within normal parameters. Paradox detected. Secondary nodes scoured human media, searching for the telltale signs of societal collapse. There was no panic, no martial law, no breakdown of order. Instead, human communications were dominated by discussions of new allergy medications, complaints about seasonal weather, and something called pollen counts. Tertiary node reviewed the biological telemetry from exposed subjects. The collective's pathogens were elegant weapons designed to dismantle a species at the cellular level. Their models predicted total immune system failure and death within 72 standard hours. The observed results were baffling. Elevated mucus production, minor irritation of the nasal passages, a slight reduction in productivity due to a state the humans called feeling under the weather. The collective mind reeled. How could a weapon so perfectly engineered fail so spectacularly? Their research into human physiology, purchased at great expense, had been cross-referenced with decades of remote observation. Initiate cross-species analysis. The data from their allies was just as confounding. The Krexthol had deployed a neural disruptor designed to induce cognitive collapse. Humans reported mild headaches and increased their consumption of simple analgesic compounds. The Yexmar had released a hormonal agent meant to sterilize the population. Humans showed no change in reproductive rates, only what their medical systems classified as seasonal mood variations. The pattern was undeniable. An entire coalition of advanced races was throwing its most sophisticated weaponry at humanity, and the cumulative effect was barely a nuisance. Two possibilities remained. Either all of their intelligence was fundamentally wrong, or humans possessed a biological resilience that bordered on the supernatural. Conclusion: standard biological warfare is insufficient. Escalate to psychological warfare protocols. Target social bonding neurochemistry. No species can survive the dissolution of core social structures. Ambassador Dale Hutchinson adjusted his tie and prepared for the daily session of the Galactic Concordat. For years, his job had been managing humanity's reputation among species that found human behavior, with its illogical emotions and chaotic politics, alternately fascinating and horrifying. Today would test his composure in ways his diplomatic training had never covered. He took his seat at the human delegation's table, a small island of Terran pragmatism in a sea of alien protocol. The air was thick with insincere sympathy. The Krexthol had sent a floral arrangement, or their equivalent, a collection of angry-looking crystalline shards that hummed with a low, ominous energy. The Exmar delegation kept making what Dale assumed were consoling gestures, though their rippling appendages looked more like they were practicing for a ritualistic duel. The Zex-High primary diplomatic node glided to his table, its movements precise and funereal. "Ambassador Hutchinson, the collective extends its most profound sympathies for the grave health challenges currently facing your species." Dale summoned a warm, professional smile. He had long ago perfected the art of thanking people for condolences about problems they had most likely caused. Your concern is appreciated. Earth's medical situation is thankfully quite manageable. Our health services are reporting only a minor uptick in the treatment of seasonal allergies. The Zex-High's optical senses dilated slightly, an expression Dale had learned to recognize as profound confusion. "Minor increases? The secondary node interjected, its voice a synthesized whisper. "Our remote telemetry indicates widespread pathogen exposure. Surely the disruption is more significant." Dale feigned a thoughtful expression, tapping his datapad where the actual figures were displayed. Tissue sales were up 12%. Antihistamine purchases had risen by 8%. I appreciate your thorough monitoring of our planetary health, though I confess I'm curious about your sources. Our metrics remain well within normal seasonal parameters. The rest of the session unfolded in a similar pattern. 17 different species offered elaborate, overwrought condolences for a health crisis that amounted to a mild case of the sniffles. Dale navigated each conversation with practiced grace, accepting their concern while studiously avoiding the obvious question. Why were they so well informed about a medical emergency that didn't exist? Jake Brennan chased the CDC story with the predatory hunger of a journalist who had spent too long writing about hospital cafeteria safety violations. His beat on the health desk was a purgatory of press releases and budget cuts. A coordinated multi-state outbreak, however minor, was a real story, and this one smelled different. His investigation started with the data. Minor respiratory illness clusters, all appearing simultaneously in geographically desperate locations. The outbreaks were too mild to trigger national surveillance alerts, but the timing was too perfect for coincidence. They were all centered near places with high foot traffic. Farmers markets, state fairs, livestock exhibitions. It looked less like natural emergence and more like intentional, if clumsy, distribution. His breakthrough came from an off-the-record conversation with Dr. Nathan Cross at the CDC. The scientist, frustrated and deeply unnerved, had been surprisingly candid. "It's like someone tried to build a nuclear bomb using a diagram of a firecracker," Nathan had said, his voice raw over the secure line. "The engineering is genius, but the blueprint is fundamentally wrong. They're targeting our biology as they think it is, not as it actually is." The story metastasized from there. Jake's Pentagon sources, tight-lipped but willing to leak, confirmed raids on clandestine labs run by operatives whose human disguises were, in the words of one contact, laughably bad. The picture that emerged was surreal. America wasn't facing homegrown extremist or a rival nation-state. It was facing extraterrestrial enemies whose understanding of human biology was so abstract and theoretical that their doomsday weapons were less effective than ragweed pollen. Jake documented the political fallout with a grim fascination. The alien attack was immediately absorbed and processed by the ravenous machinery of American partisan politics. Conservative news channels ran segments blaming liberal environmental policies for weakening the American immune system. Liberal outlets suggested that conservative skepticism of science had left the nation vulnerable. Neither side seemed overly concerned that the attackers were from another planet. They were just another cudgel with which to beat the opposition. The coverage revealed humanity's most bizarre and potent survival trait, the ability to treat an existential threat as just another talking point in an endless political argument. While the underlying machinery of civilization churned on, completely undisturbed, Americans screamed at each other on television about the alien flu while continuing to go to work, pay their taxes, and maintain the very infrastructure needed to fight a real war. Jake's story was no longer about a failed bioweapon. It was about the absurd, chaotic, and indestructible nature of human society. The HFY collective, confident in its superior understanding of psychological warfare, initiated the second phase of its attack. Biology had failed. The chaotic mess of the human genome had proven unexpectedly resilient, but no species could withstand the precise, surgical dismantling of the neurochemical bonds that held its society together. Their specialists had engineered their most elegant pathogen yet. It was designed to target the human brain's delicate symphony of oxytocin, vasopressin, and dopamine. The very molecules responsible for pair bonding, social trust, and hierarchical stability. The models were clear. Within 2 planetary rotations of exposure, human society would collapse into a paranoid morass of individuals incapable of cooperation. Deployment was flawless, synchronized with peak human social gatherings. The pathogen, airborne and visible, spread through the population. Primary analysis node monitored human behavioral indicators. The initial results were promising. human subjects showed a marked increase in social interaction. Attention to grooming and physical appearance spiked. Secondary nodes scoured communication networks. Instead of the expected breakdown of social bonds, the data showed a surge in the formation of new relationships. An activity the humans called flirting increased by 300% across all measured demographics. Dating app usage overloaded servers in several major metropolitan areas. Tertiary node reviewed the biological telemetry. The models had predicted a collapse of the neurochemical systems for social bonding. The observed results were the opposite. The pathogen was not inhibiting hormone production, it was stimulating it. Oxytocin and dopamine levels were off the charts. The collective faced an unprecedented paradox. Their psychological weapon hadn't just failed, it had backfired. It was strengthening human social systems, not destroying them. The anomaly required further investigation. They focused their sensors on Ambassador Hutchinson at the Galactic Concordat. His behavior was a perfect match for the expected systems. Elevated social response patterns, heightened interpersonal focus, a clear difficulty in maintaining professional composure. The weapon was working on him. And yet, human civilization continued to function. The collective could not reconcile the data. How could a species maintain perfect societal stability when its leaders were clearly compromised? It suggested a level of social redundancy, an adaptive resilience that defied all their tactical models. Humans, it seemed, could absorb a direct psychological assault and somehow convert it into a social advantage. Dale Hutchinson walked into the emergency session of the Galactic Concordat, fighting a war on two fronts. One was against the aliens trying to conquer his planet. The other was against his own biochemistry, which, thanks to the latest alien bioweapon, was making it incredibly difficult to maintain professional decorum around any remotely attractive life form. The chamber was abuzz. The topic was, once again, humanity's latest health crisis. Dale took his seat, forcing himself to focus on his briefing notes, and not on the surprisingly elegant way the Yexmar lead representative's crystalline carapace caught the light. "Ambassador Hutchinson," the Yexmar approached, its voice a series of soft chimes. "Our people extend their heartfelt concern for your species' psychological afflictions. We understand humans face a significant neurochemical disruption." Dale smiled, and for the first time, it felt entirely genuine. "Thank you for your concern. Earth's psychological health metrics remain within acceptable parameters. In fact, our sociologists are reporting a heartening increase in community engagement." The Yexmore delegation exchanged a flurry of bioluminescent patterns that Dale found utterly fascinating. Their shimmer was far more aesthetically pleasing than he recalled from previous, less hormonally compromised sessions. "Ambassador," injected the Krexthal primary node, its tentacles moving with a hypnotic grace, "surely your species recognizes the gravity of a neurochemical attack targeting your core social bonds." The question required careful thought, which was difficult when Dale was busy admiring the intricate suction cups on the Krexthal's appendages. "Our social bonds, I assure you, remain fully functional. If anything, human social interactions have shown a marked increase in both quality and frequency." His diplomatic training was at war with a chemically induced state of bonhomie. Every alien representative seemed more charismatic, their arguments more compelling, their physical forms more intriguing. During a break, the Regalian trade representative, a serpentine being of breathtaking grace, cornered him. "Ambassador, our intelligence suggests human social systems are facing an unprecedented crisis. Surely your people require assistance." Dale found himself considering her offer with an intensity that had absolutely nothing to do with interstellar trade. Human social systems are proving remarkably resilient, he said, his voice a little too warm. We continue to form interpersonal relationships at, or even above, normal rates, with, I might add, a rather encouraging degree of enthusiasm. The session concluded with Dale having graciously accepted sympathy from half the galaxy for a psychological plague that had, in effect, turned the entire human race into better, more enthusiastic daters. The irony was not lost on him. Frank Dermott's briefing had moved from the absurd to the sublime. The assembled leadership of the American military, men and women who had managed conventional wars for decades, now had to grapple with a new, utterly bizarre reality. The situation has escalated, Frank reported, his voice as flat as the tabletop. Intelligence confirms multiple alien species are now conducting coordinated psychological warfare. The latest pathogen was designed to disrupt human social bonding. General Hayes looked up from a classified report, her expression unreadable. Frank, this report from the State Department seems to suggest the opposite. It says our diplomatic personnel are reporting enhanced social responses. That is correct, General. Frank met her gaze without flinching. CDC analysis confirms the alien weapon inadvertently triggered a massive increase in the production of human bonding hormones. Ambassador Hutchinson's diplomatic effectiveness remains high, though he has reported some difficulty maintaining strict professional objectivity around aesthetically pleasing alien representatives. A stunned silence descended upon the room. The leaders of the most powerful military on Earth were processing the fact that their enemy had just tried to destroy them with what amounted to a spaceborne aphrodisiac. So let me get this straight, Deputy Director Collins said, breaking his silence. The aliens are trying to wipe us out with a series of biological and psychological attacks that just keep making us stronger? That is the current assessment, Frank confirmed, sliding another folder across the table. Their technology is superior. Their understanding of its target is, however, catastrophically flawed. They seem to be working from intelligence that is not only outdated, but fundamentally incorrect about our biology, our psychology, and now our politics. General Hayes scanned the new reports. What's their read on the situation? They appear to believe their attacks are succeeding, Frank said. Ambassador Hutchinson reports they are interpreting our partisan political debates about their attacks as proof of societal collapse, rather than as evidence of a functioning, if noisy, democracy. They think we are weak, divided, and demoralized. The final implication settled over the room like a shroud, but it was a shroud woven of opportunity. Their enemy was powerful, arrogant, and completely ignorant. Frank, General Hayes said, a thin, predatory smile touching her lips for the first time. What is your assessment of their next move? Given their stated belief that we are on the verge of collapse, I anticipate an escalation to conventional military action, Frank concluded. They are about to invade a planet they believe has already defeated itself, a planet whose inhabitants are, thanks to the invaders' own weapons, healthier, happier, and more motivated than they've been in decades. From his analytical perch in intelligence, Master Chief Rick Donovan watched the American response to the alien threat, and had contradicted every military doctrine he had ever learnt about civilian morale. He had seen populations crumble under pressure. Americans, however, seemed to thrive on it. The tactical implications were fascinating. An enemy watching from orbit would see a nation tearing itself apart. They would mistake the furious debate for terminal division. They wouldn't see the underlying unspoken consensus. Americans would argue about absolutely everything. The cost, the strategy, the moral implications, right up until the moment the first shot was fired, and then they would, as one, turn their unified fury on the outsider who had dared to interrupt their argument. Rick's field reports painted a surreal picture. Civilians were treating the threat of alien invasion like a new season of a reality TV show, even as they went to their jobs in factories that were quietly retooling for military production. Military recruitment numbers held steady. Consumer spending was normal. The most remarkable data point was this. The same polls that showed the country viciously divided on policy showed near unanimous reports for shooting any alien that threatened American sovereignty. The aliens were making the same mistake every one of America's enemies had made. They were listening to the noise of the debate, but they couldn't hear the harmony of the underlying agreement. They mistook the chaos of democracy for the weakness of a failing state. Jake Brennan's reporting had transcended journalism and entered the realm of cultural anthropology. He was documenting how a 22nd century democracy processed an extinction-level threat, and the answer was by turning it into partisan entertainment. The alien hay fever was now a cable news staple. Pundits debated alien motivations and military strategy with the same vitriolic certainty they usually reserve for tax policy. Liberal commentators framed the threat as a consequence of science denial. Conservative commentators framed it as a failure of border security, albeit on a planetary scale. And both sides, in their own way, implicitly supported vaporizing the aliens. This, Jake realized, was the core of the American survival mechanism. The system was designed to absorb any crisis, no matter how profound, and transmute it into political theater. The screaming on television wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign that the system was working. It was processing the threat. His man-on-the-street interviews were a kaleidoscope of paranoia, opportunism, and unshakable confidence. People would complain about the government's response, spin wild conspiracy theories about the aliens' true motives, and then in the same breath express their absolute certainty that the US military would handle it. The most telling pattern was the one that defied all logic. A significant portion of the population that polled as unsure if aliens exist also polled in favor of preemptive military action against them. The contradiction was perfectly American. The debate was the point. The actual existence of the threat was secondary to the constitutional right to argue about it. The aliens, Jake concluded, weren't just fighting the United States military. They were fighting the very concept of a free, chaotic, and inexplicably resilient society, and it was a fight they couldn't possibly win. The final analysis of the HFY collective was a masterpiece of flawed logic. Every data point filtered through their profound misunderstanding of humanity confirmed their success. Human political discourse analysis shows irreconcilable factional conflict. Social consensus has collapsed. Human diplomatic core analysis shows key personnel exhibiting compromised neurochemical states. Interstellar relations are dysfunctional. Human military command analysis shows leadership paralyzed by domestic political pressure. Strategic response capability is crippled. The conclusion was inescapable. Their campaign of biological, psychological, and political warfare had been a resounding success. The human species was a rotten fruit, ready to be squished. They had been weakened and divided, their society teetering on the brink, ripe for conquest. The planet's infrastructure remained intact, ready for post-invasion exploitation. With the serene confidence of a predator that has already hamstrung its prey, the collective broadcast its formal declaration of war across all galactic networks. They cited humanity's clear inability to govern itself, framing the invasion not as a conquest, but as a humanitarian intervention. The invasion fleets warped into existence at the edge of the solar system. Their tactical plans were designed to crush a demoralized, sick, and divided enemy. They expected minimal, disorganized resistance. It would be a swift, clean victory. Frank Dermott received the war declaration during a routine morning briefing. The message, displayed on the main screen of the Pentagon's Crisis Management Center, transformed the atmosphere in the room from one of cautious analysis to one of grim purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank announced, his voice cutting through the sudden quiet, "we have a formal declaration of war from the HFY Collective and their allies. Their communication cites our civilizational collapse as justification for military conquest." The flag officers around the table absorbed the news not with shock, but with a kind of predatory focus. The theoretical threat was now an active invasion. "Frank," General Hayes asked, her eyes fixed on the alien text, "what is their assessment of our current readiness?" "They believe our population is physically compromised by their bioweapons. Our social cohesion has been destroyed by their psych weapons, and our command structure is paralyzed by political infighting." Frank allowed a small, cold smile. The mood in the room had shifted. It was no longer a crisis meeting. It was an operational planning session. Their enemy had been kind enough to deliver a detailed intelligence report on their own flawed assumptions. They had expected to fight a slick, depressed, and fractured world. They were about to meet a unified, accidentally enhanced, and profoundly irritated one. General Hayes stood up, her expression one of pure professional satisfaction. "Gentlemen, we are being invaded by an enemy that has mistaken a domestic dispute for a terminal illness. I like our odds." Dale Hutchinson's final diplomatic session at the Galactic Concordat was a masterclass in surrealism. He was representing a species that had just been formally slated for conquest by several of the civilizations in the room. There was no protocol for this. The chamber buzzed with a new kind of energy. The delegations that weren't actively invading his planet now kept a respectful distance. The Regalian trade representative approached, her serpentine form radiating diplomatic caution. "Ambassador Hutchinson, our delegation expresses regret at the recent developments. We hope a peaceful resolution can be found." Dale smiled, the warmth still enhanced by the lingering effects of the alien psych weapon. "Thank you for your concern. Humanity appreciates its continued relationship with all species, not currently attempting our extermination." The Yexma offered formal condolences for humanity's impending defeat, expressing hope that the survivors would adapt well to colonial administration. Dale accepted their sympathy with the grace of a man listening to a weather report. The most challenging conversation was with the Zaxhai. They approached him like funeral directors discussing casket options. "Ambassador Hutchinson," the primary node intoned, "the collective regrets the necessity of this action. We hope human suffering will be minimal." Dale considered his response, balancing protocol against the sheer absurdity of it all. "The collective's concern for our welfare is noted," he said, his voice even. "We, too, anticipate the military resolution will be swift and decisive." The session concluded. Dale had successfully maintained diplomatic relations with aliens who were actively trying to kill him, and accepted condolences for a defeat that was never going to happen. His intelligence briefings were clear. The alien assumptions about human military capability were about to be comprehensively and violently corrected. The tactical coordination of the human military response demonstrated a principle that autocratic societies could never grasp: a democracy's ability to shift from chaotic debate to unified action is not a weakness, but its most formidable weapon. Under Rick Donovan's operational command, federal, state, and local resources integrated into a seamless defense network. The alien invasion plans, predicated on fighting a demoralized and divided enemy, fell apart within the first hour. They expected to encounter scattered resistance from sick, confused soldiers. They found themselves facing unified defenders, accidentally enhanced by their own bioweapons and motivated by a righteous, collective fury at having their noisy, dysfunctional planetary squabbles interrupted by uninvited guests. Rick's battlefield analysis revealed an enemy whose doctrine was based entirely on theory. They had planned for every contingency except the one they were facing. A competent, innovative, and cheerful opponent. Human military units, their immune systems inadvertently supercharged and their morale at an all-time high. Performed with a level of tactical brilliance that overwhelmed alien command structures. The alien strategy had been to decapitate a weak government and occupy a compliant populace. Instead, they were facing a total mobilization, a planetary-scale bar fight where every citizen was a combatant. Rick's after-action reports would later read like a comedy of errors, detailing technologically superior alien forces being outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and ultimately routed by an enemy they had fundamentally misunderstood. The decisive factor was the very thing the aliens had identified as a weakness, a political culture that could argue about everything and still unite to kill a common foe. Jake Brennan's coverage of the victory captured the singular, glorious absurdity of the American achievement. Humanity had not only repelled an alien invasion, it had done so without ever pausing its own internal arguments. His reporting showed the swift transition from defense to counter-offensive, as human forces operating with a level of coordination that defied alien intelligence, systematically dismantled the invasion fleet. But the most revealing aspect was what happened after. The moment the threat was neutralized, Americans went right back to screaming at each other about post-war policy, alien rights, and the constitutionality of the military's actions. The very political chaos the aliens had mistaken for weakness had continued, unabated, throughout a successful war against an extinction-level threat. Jake's interviews with military leaders revealed a deep professional satisfaction. The enemy had, in their own war declaration, provided a perfect roadmap of their own weaknesses and assumptions. American planners had simply exploited it. His final analysis identified the fundamental alien error, the same error made by so many human adversaries before him. They had mistaken the noise of freedom for the silence of the grave. They had attacked a society that could combine democratic chaos with military precision, and had been annihilated by the paradox. The victory was a testament to a political culture that could maintain civilian control and constitutional debate while waging total war, a feat of social resilience no authoritarian system could ever hope to match. Dale Hutchinson's return to the Galactic Concordat was not as a representative of a plucky, endangered species, but as the ambassador of a new and undisputed galactic power. The chamber's atmosphere was thick with a new kind of respect, tinged with fear. The Regalian representative approached, her earlier condescension replaced by cautious deference. "Ambassador, my people express profound admiration for humanity's achievements. We hope our productive trade relationship can continue." Dale smiled, the warmth still amplified by the lingering biochemical gift from his former enemies. Humanity values its friends. We look forward to discussing post-war trade and, perhaps, new mutual defense treaties. The Yexmar delegation offered a formal, groveling apology for their grievous misassessment of human capabilities. Dale accepted it with a grace that felt entirely genuine. The alien psych weapon had, he reflected, made being magnanimous in victory much easier. The final, most satisfying moment came from the surviving Zex-High delegate. Its previous confidence was gone, replaced by the posture of a beggar. "Ambassador," it whispered, "the collective acknowledges its complete analytical failure. We request formal diplomatic asylum for our surviving personnel." Dale considered the request, his professional mind weighing the legalities while his chemically enhanced hindbrain admired the subtle tremor in the alien's manipulator claws. "Humanity will consider all asylum requests through the appropriate legal channels," he said, his voice calm and full of a power he had never wielded before, "consistent with our constitutional principles." The session concluded. Diplomatic relations were restored. Humanity's place in the galaxy was secure. The aliens had thrown their very best weapons at humanity, and in doing so, had made them stronger, more unified, and, in Dale's case at least, a much more charming and effective diplomat. It was the ultimate irony. They had tried to destroy a civilization, and had instead guaranteed its ascendancy.